Hello. In this session, we are going to look into error handling and how to deal with errors that inevitably will pop up at some point. So for this, again, in our notebooks folder, we create a new notebook and we are going to call it something like error handling. For the sake of time, I'm foregoing the markdown cells, so please feel free to add markdown cells and your own notes as you like and as you wish. Errors in Python. To create an error, quite easy. 1 divided by 0, it gives you a nice description, a zero division error. So you cannot divide an integer 1 by an integer 0 or even a float, doesn't matter. So 0.0 also gives you the same division error, in this case a float division by 0. So what you see here is a traceback, what's called a traceback, written here. And in this case it's quite easy because we have only one line of code, and so the error message is quite short. So zero division error, float division by 0. And it points us to the line where the error occurs. So in this case, super easy. Now the question is, how can we deal with this error if it happens? Sometimes errors are unavoidable, and if we expect an error to occur under certain circumstances, we can deal with it appropriately. You should take care of not wildly using the except statement we're going to introduce, or I'm going to introduce soon, to just capture any error and just let the program finish. You need to be, errors happen for a reason, and typically because you didn't program something correctly or you didn't pay attention to one specific case or multiple specific cases that might pop up, which gives you an indication of an underlying issue. So you need to sort out your errors properly. However, if you, for some reason, expect under certain circumstances to this division by 0 error, and it's okay, you know how to deal with it, you can escape it. And for this, I'm going to introduce the except statement, or the try and except statement. So Python has the possibility to kind of test the code or run the code, and if a certain error occurs, do something else. It's quite related to the if statements that we had before, but only it captures the error that occurs. Okay, so let's try this. The try statement, similar to the if statement or the for loop or anything, it begins with try and then a colon, and then the next one is an indented block. So whatever code is executed in this block is tried, and if the error occurs in that block, then an exception is raised, so except, and then we get another block. Right? So try, here, this is the general syntax, something except do something else. Obviously this is not code, this does not run, but this is the general structure, right? So we can, for example, do here print now I'm dividing by 0. Oh yeah. If you have strings where you need or you want the quotation mark inside the string, then you can't do it this way. You see from the syntax highlighting that this is a problem already, and because Python thinks we started a string with a quotation mark here and we ended the string with a quotation mark here, and everything behind it is kind of undefined. In this case, you can use double quotation marks here and there. And then Python knows that this string starts with double quotation marks, and everything until the next double quotation mark is part of that string. Okay, then let's divide by 0, 1 divided by 0, and then except, let's print something happened. Right? Okay, so what's going to happen is this is executed, print. The print statement is executed. Then the I divided by 1 divided by 0 is executed, and this gives an error. And then we go into this statement here, and something happens. So it will first print out, now I'm dividing, sorry, by 0, and then the error occurs, and then this also happens. So exactly what we expected to happen. This is something you need to be aware of, because part of this is, it's a kind of dangerous thing, this try and except method, because part of it is executed, and only when the error occurs, everything afterwards, for example, here we can make another statement, print blah blah, right? Then in this line here, the error occurs, so this is not executed anymore. But because here the error occurs, Python jumps to the except statement and prints then something happens. So if I do this, I don't see the blah blah. However, if I delete it here and add it here, then I see blah blah, because afterwards only the error occurs, and then it jumps into the exception. Something happened by, let's delete this again. Something happened is by design kind of vague, because if you do this, you can also, quite dangerously, I think, just add a pass statement. So don't care, right? Don't do anything, just continue with your code. That's the pass code word. So try, print something, then, oh yeah, some error occurs, and then except when some error here occurs, do nothing. So I don't get an error back, right? Here in the first case, right, 1 divided by 0, the program stops. This cell stops and doesn't continue. Here I don't get any error message, even though I created an error. If I want to have more information about what kind of error here happened, right, I can extend this except statement. If some exception exception as, and then we have to call it something, E, right? Then we can print E. However, the code still runs now without an error. Let's execute this. But I get some additional information. I get basically the error information, division by 0, that would have been printed out if the error actually happened in the code. It did actually happen, but Python didn't force us to stop the program. The program ran through, but we get some additional information here. What you can also do is limit this to this exception. And this is kind of general, right? This is any exception that occurs, right? If I do something like print with one bracket, now that's wrong because it checks it first. Let's try something like 5 plus a as a string, right? This doesn't work, right? It's not a syntax error because syntactically it's correct. I can potentially do this. It only when Python tries to evaluate 5 plus string a, that doesn't make sense. In this case, this is also an exception is raised, right? And if I do just the 5 plus a, not in an except statement, I get a type error, right? So the type error is unsupported operand types for plus. Int and string, basically it says you can't use the operator plus between an int and a string. Also, this exception is caught by this, right? Because we very broadly used any exception. Whatever happens, if any exception happens, do this, right? Print E and continue. Right? Keep calm, carry on. So, as I said, we wanted, if we know that in this case 1 divided by 0 might happen, we can limit our except statement only to this zero division error. In this case, the zero division error, I just mark it here, copy it, and instead of the exception, I use the zero division error as E. I print E. Then the division by zero error is printed. In this case, I can just either print it, or I can also just make a pass. Now the code runs, right? But nothing happens, even though I get a zero division error. Right? For example, if you would wanted to try to calculate the logarithm for a list of objects and you have a zero in there or a negative value or something, you could use this zero division error as a catch this, and if you know what you want to do when this error occurs in your specific case, you can deal with it in this case. Right? Maybe to make it more clear how you would use it in a certain scenario, let's assume you have a variable a equals 1, and you want to try do something here. You want to calculate something, right? B is 1 divided by 0 or something, or let's say 1 divided by a, yeah, and then you want to do print. So you want to print B or add it to a list. Let's make a list. We had lists already, so let's make a list L, an empty list L, and we want to calculate. I'm going to delete this. Now I'm dividing by 0. I'm going to delete this by replacing or calculating B and then appending B to the list L. Typically, you would do this in a loop also, right? We had loops already. Let's put this in a loop for I in range of 10. Just remember, a range of 10 gives you 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So I would be, in the first instance, it would be 0, right? So if we divide here by I, we don't need A anymore. Sorry, I'm making this up as I go along, this example. So if we divide by 1, I would, in the first case, I would get 1 divided by 0, which is not happening, or then gives an error. The second time, it would be 1 divided by 1 is 1, 1 divided by 2 is 1/2, and so on. Right? And then it appends this, whatever comes out here, to L. Except in the case of a zero division error, right? Then we can do something like L dot append and just do error, right? Append an error instead. Now, because this is happening in the for loop, in every iteration of the for loop, we have to indent the whole thing. I marked everything and then hit tab to indent everything here. Okay, that was maybe a bit confusing. Let's go through it one more time. So we create an empty list, and then we want to append to this list the value b, which we say b is 1 divided by I, where I is the index of the for loop. And only if this zero division error happens, because we know it's going to happen, 0 in the first case, it's going to be a zero division error. Because this error happens here, we do not append anything, right? But we go into the except statement and we append, instead of depending whatever that would be, we depend the word error. Let's execute this. So it executed, escape X to delete this cell. It executed without error, right? And I can do it again. And now we can have a look at L. What does L look like? So exactly as we expected. First it gave me an error. The second time 1, 1/2, 1/3, and so on. So this is in this specific case, and obviously this doesn't only work for zero division errors, but this kind of concept applies to any error. If you know what kind of error you expect, you can deal with it appropriately. But please don't use it as a general statement, just don't care about errors. You can get any program to run with the try and except, but it's not a good idea to do, because you miss errors. You want to see errors. Right? but especially if you know, okay, in this specific case, there's something is happening, you can deal with it. Okay, concerning the errors, we are going to see more errors. You are going to see a lot more errors while trying to learn or learning Python, beginning with Python. This traceback sometimes looks more complicated. It's hard to create now without going coding a lot more code beforehand. But typically it reads from last, so from bottom up. Right? So the last error that occurred will be at the bottom, and then step by step through all the functions that were affected by the error, it goes up. But we'll see this later in more complicated scenarios. Okay, try play around with this a little bit. Try to create your own errors and try maybe come up with your own list and try to come up with your own error that happens, right? So for example, we had this type error. If we do a plus 5, right? This gives me a type error. As an example or as an exercise, try to catch this error. Also maybe in a for loop, right? So how would you do this, right? You could do something like L equals a new list. Let's call it L2. A new empty list, and now a for loop for I in and now if you use the range command again, this gives you all integers, right? 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. But we can specify the list list itself, so we can do, for example, B, C, D, but then we add a 5, for example, right? So if we loop over this, right, and then we do L2 dot append I. So we append for each in let's call it B again, because we first create B here. B would then be I plus A plus I, right? Something like this. I hope you understand what I'm trying to do. So into this empty list, append different elements, and for each element in this list, which we declared here, append A plus B, A plus C, A plus D, and then A plus 5. This will give you a type error, because this is the exception that is raised. Now, if I execute this, you see I get the type error. Right? Can only concatenate string, not int to string. So the plus basically doesn't work. So try to catch this error in the same way we did here, but only this error. Right? And it's not a zero division error, and try to deal with this error in a meaningful way. See you soon.